Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's Sunday conversation here on Big Country Politics. This week our special guest is our very own House District 71 Representative, Mr. Stan Lambert. Stan, it's been a hot minute, but you have been very busy in Austin. In fact, that's where you're joining us today. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Manny. Always good to be with you, and look forward to our conversation.
Yes, sir. Well, the school choice, school vouchers, education savings account, however you want to reference that, it is officially passed in the Senate and in the House of the Texas Legislature. First and foremost, give me your overall thoughts on this. This was something that you also voted for kind of down the stretch of this. Your thoughts on this kind of after the fact, after all this, now that we can look back on this?
Sure, Manny. I think the thing I would start out talking about is the significant investment in public education that the House voted to approve in HB 2. The bill that we saw and heard on the floor was an increase in funding of about $7.7 billion new funding for public education. And that's part of about a $9 billion overall omnibus package of funding for public education. So we wanted to make sure that before we took up and discussed the voucher bill, the ESA and SB 2, that we had made strong commitments and a strong investment in public education. And so I think with $7.7 billion, the increase in the basic allotment, which was almost $400 based on weighted average daily attendance per student, I would have liked to have seen that particular area of the funding increased a little bit more to give school districts some flexibility. But about 40% of that basic allotment is now statutorily dedicated to teachers and teacher raises. And that also has an inflationary component built in, so that as property values increase in the state and in House District 71 and in school districts like Abilene and Jimnet and Wiley, that basic allotment will actually have a inflationary component built into it, so that we have some increase in public funding that will be automatically included every 2 years that we come back to Austin. There were some additional measures to make sure that even if enrollment drops in some of our, which is what we have seen in the last few years, that those school districts will continue to be funded. We've ensured, and we have put into statute now, once the governor signs the bill, that those monies will be continued to be invested in public education, in addition to the ESA voucher program. Once we did take up the voucher bill, as you know, it was about $1 billion program. It's basically divided into several buckets of funding, with the lowest bucket being those families with the greatest need, in other words, the lowest income levels, as well as those students with disabilities and special educational needs. And then the buckets increase a little bit up to the final bucket, which is the 20% that basically is the universal, where any family can apply. But we did some things at the very end of that process to ensure that rural schools and rural education would not be impacted by a new ESA voucher program. And once we were able to negotiate those amendments and make sure that they were added into the SB 2 bill for ESAs, then I decided that the program would have more limitations. It would be a very small program starting out, and that's what I had always advocated for and indicated that I would be voting for if those amendments were accepted.
Now, you ran on, opposing school vouchers, opposing education savings accounts, things of that nature. Was it tough to get on board with that in terms of approving this, voting yes, when it all came down to it?
Absolutely. It was very hard for me because I have been a very staunch opponent of the conceptual idea of using public dollars to fund private education. But again, once the amendments were accepted by the governor's staff and the Senate and our House Public Education Committee chairman, then I felt obligated once those amendments were accepted and put on the bill, then I felt obligated to support the legislation. There's still a lot of things that are restricted as far as how the money can be spent, how you can't go on, if you're a homeschool kid and your parents want to take you on a ski trip and use the $2,000 voucher, you can't do that. It's got to be used for tuition, for educational supplies. There are just a list of things there that will make sure that the money's being used and used effectively and efficiently, and will be accountable as far as the taxpayers funding that program.
Senator Ted Cruz recently went on the record with an outlet in Dallas saying by injecting competition into the system, it will improve the public schools. Every child in Texas deserves access to an education, regardless of their race, ethnicity, regardless of their wealth and zip code. Does this inject competition for these school districts to get better?
Manny, I think competition's good in anything as far as whether it's business or industry or banking or whatever it may be. I think competition can improve and make us better. It gives us kind of an insight as to what others are doing, how they're doing it, how effective they are. I really think that though in West Texas and certainly in our rural areas of the state, we're not going to see as much impact necessarily, because I do think that this is more really of an urban issue, a metropolitan major city type issue versus what's happening in our rural schools. And that's why I've been such a strong opponent of a voucher program, because I think that it doesn't really impact what's happening in our schools like Abilene and like Wiley and so forth. And so while I'm a big supporter of private education as well, and I think we have some private schools in West Texas that are doing a very good job. So I'm not trying to say one is better than the other.
All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, more with House District 71 Representative Stan Lambert. We're talking about the future of the STAR test in Texas, plus some other things that he's passionate about as he heads into the home stretch of the legislative session in Austin. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, welcome back to the Sunday conversation here on Big Country Politics. This week our special guest is House District 71 State Representative Stan Lambert. Stan, in the first segment we were talking about school choice, school vouchers, education savings accounts, however you want to reference that. Now let's keep school choice in mind, but let's kind of shift gears to the STAR test. As we move forward with school choice in Texas, how does this impact the future of the STAR test in the state?
Manny, I think that we would all agree that to some extent there has to be some level of testing in our schools to compare data. And we talked earlier about competition. We talked about what's happening with the ESA program and the new voucher program that will go into effect once the governor signs the bill. The idea that we could go a whole school year without some type of norm reference test or some type of a periodic examination of what are our children learning, what type of growth has occurred. The STAR test has certainly been the most recent example of what our public education system has been held accountable for. We know that in many cases, the fact that we put so much emphasis and so much weight on one day, one test, that's not fair to our students. It's not fair to our teachers. And so anything we can do to try to move away from that kind of system where we put so much weight on one day of testing. And I think that's what will be that's what we'll see come forward as a result of House Bill 4, which has not been on the floor yet. It's going to be scheduled, I'm sure, in the next week or so. But that will be the way that we address the elimination of the STAR test and introduce some type of norm reference testing so that all of our public education and to some degree our private schools as well will be held accountable to. And that way we have at least some metrics, some way of evaluation that makes good sense and makes us be able to at least have data moving forward as we add an additional program that's going to use taxpayer dollars to fund private schools. Some have said that many times the STAR test has gone way too far in terms of trying to make third graders answer questions that only a sixth grader or seventh grader should know based on our TEKS curriculum that the State Board of Education endorses and authorizes. So we need to make some changes. There will be some changes in terms of how we go forward with testing, but we do think the STAR test will be in our past.
Just a few weeks ago, you joined with Caroline Fairley for Texas, an ACU alum, there to pass HB 1481 to restrict digital device use during the school day. Tell us a little bit about that. That sounds interesting unto its own.
Yes, sir. I think a lot of times what we hear from teachers and those that are on the front line in education is that there's way too much distraction. There's way too much opportunity for students to pull out their cell phone, to be playing games, or to enact with social media. And I know that's a very controversial issue because I know parents are concerned about safety and how they could communicate with their child if they needed to on a as needed basis. So very difficult conversation or discussion, certainly when the bill was laid out. But I went back and watched the layout of Mrs. Fairley's bill, Representative Fairley's bill in the public education, in state affairs. It was a pretty lengthy layout where the idea that these devices would not be allowed in classrooms. There will be some funding that could allow for some type of apparatus in the classroom for those phones to be placed in. So they're going to be within reach necessarily if there's, some type of a situation where parents do need to reach their children, some type of situation that would allow parents to have that kind of access. But overall, we want to give teachers more control of the classroom. We want to give them opportunities to inject the learning process, the knowledge that our students are needing to have at whatever level, and yet at the same time, we want that opportunity for those parents to still have some type of access to their kids.
Last question for you, Stan. As you kind of head into the home stretch of this legislative session, the second half, if you will, is there anything that you're passionate about that you're looking forward to seeing done?
Well, this is a really critical time in the legislature. We're getting into some deadlines as far as when bills can be heard, how many more calendars we're going to actually see. We're going to start seeing a backup in terms of the number of bills that are going to be coming out of calendars, and so there are going to be some long nights here in the Capitol, which is fine. That's part of what we signed up to do, and we're excited, looking forward to that. I'm very proud of the fact that most of our legislation that we've focused on this session is moving forward. We were very instrumental and very involved in making sure that Texas State Technical College is going to receive a large endowment that will allow them to expand their campuses across the state. We know how good and effective TSTC does in workforce education, and so we've carried that bill through the House. It just was approved just the other day with 129 votes in the House, so it'll move to the Senate now. But we're excited about what's happening in terms of not just that bill, but many other bills that are addressing the workforce shortages that we have throughout the state, whether it's teachers, whether it's nurses, whether it's prison workers, whatever the issue is. We talk a lot about over the last interim about the workforce shortage and how that would be a very significant thing that we would need to address in this legislative session. So excited to see those bills moving forward, and we're looking forward to the next 32 days here in Austin.
All righty. Well, for House District 71 State Representative Stan Lambert, I am Manny Diaz. This has been another Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. We'll see you next time. God bless.